Hello, everybody. Welcome to Latinas Chat Media, the brunch edition. I'm Sofia Quintero. We finally have Maria Nieto with us this week. We did a technical run and was able to troubleshoot what issues she has. And we decided not to hold up. Siri was with us on our technical run, but she then had to power down her computer over and over again. So we're just going to go right away because we're trying to keep today's conversation to an hour. So I think, what do you want to start off with, Maria? We're going to hold off on the Zoe as Nina part 2 because we do have a guest panelist and she's in transit, and we'll wait till she shows up to actually have her share her feelings about the conversation we had last month. So what do you want to dive into right now first, given the topics? We want to talk about Erykah Badu and Africa Bambaataa, which basically what happens when your faves fail big time.
When you're what?
To talk about Zoe Nina, which we're going to hold off towards the middle or the end. I guess we should start off with how we feel about celebrities getting involved in electoral politics. And
actually, let's wait until Siri gets in because I know she's really into the Bernie Sanders campaign. Yes. Actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with the Erykah Badu, which to me is kind of a softball, only because this whole concept of women being responsible for the unbridled sexuality of men and the responsibility that falls on us not to quote unquote tempt them, I think is ridiculous and archaic, and it's surprising coming from somebody like her. I'm really disappointed because that's archaic. It's ridiculous. It's I think it does a disservice to men, but it absolutely is impressive and a disservice to women.
I agree with you. I mean, there's many layers to this thing. Like let's put Erykah Badu's celebrity aside and just talk about what she's talking about. I think the big crux of what she was saying was how sexual attraction is natural. That like the sexual attraction doesn't know age. It just knows that there is this maturing body and it gets triggered. And my real problem is let's not conflate attraction with behavior.
Right.
Because, if we want to have a conversation about not shaming people, especially men, for their sexual attraction, nobody's shaming desire. It's about what you do with that desire. And so I understand that people want to have complicated conversations. People want to have nuanced conversations. But nuance can't be an excuse to have absolutely no boundaries where we don't have a basic foundation of adults should not be fucking children.
Right.
Period. Like, can we at least agree on that? Because we're not talking about, so he's a grown man and he sees a 12-year-old girl, she has breasts, she has hips, and his libido is not thinking, oh, she's 12.
Right.
If you wanna say that, you wanna talk biological, natural, but that's a whole other thing between him stepping to her and trying to have sex with her and him harassing her on the street. And I think this also relates to the recent issue with the allegations against Africa Bambaataa, which I want to talk about more in depth when we get to that.
Yeah.
But this is what the problem is. We are talking about adults believing that their desire entitles them sexual access to children. And that has to be a non-starter right there.
Yeah, but the whole issue that she's talking about is it was if I'm not mistaken, it's a school in New Zealand where she was saying that the girl's skirt, should be a certain length and down to the knee, I think it was, because that way you temper the desire. In other words, the women don't sexually tempt the other kids, and I think it's between children. And for me, you're right. Absolutely. Men behaving on sexual attraction towards children, that's reprehensible. That's that is what it is. But what I take issue with is placing the responsibility of men's behavior on women. And also
girls. We're talking about girls. We're not even talking about women. That's what makes it even worse. And just adults on children, because women can be predators, and you have you have men who prey on boys and
right
men who prey on girls. So this is really goes beyond. I'm stressing that. I'm like, yes, I mean, in a heteronormative, patriarchal world, it's more likely grown man on young girl, but abuse can happen across genders and sexual orientations. And the biggest problem with what she's saying, and she's not the only one saying it, she's just the one that's being pushed back on it because she's visible and she did use her platform to say this. It's about making children responsible for adults' behavior. And like you said, whether that is a man looking at a girl, a man looking at a boy, a woman looking at a girl, a woman looking at a boy, whatever. It's about making them responsible. And it just goes to show you that people still in 2016 don't understand what rape is and how it works. Because this is not about desire. You know, control. It's not about desire. It's not about desire, because you can have your desire. It's about what is appropriate for you to do with your desire or not. And it just doesn't make no sense, because if this was all about desirability, you know, we live in an age of society where elderly people get raped. Yeah. Right? We live in, you know, an ableist society where people who have disabilities get raped. So all this is just bullshit apologies primarily for men's predatory behavior, for men who are predators for their behavior.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, I think part of, and this is happening in schools across America also, is this whole concept that girls should be covered up so the boys their age, or just so that the opposite sex is not tempted. And honestly, look, I can see a naked man walk down the street that I find incredibly attractive. I'm not going to go jump his bones.
Right, exactly.
And the same exact, you know, honestly, it goes down to the concept of desire. I may want to eat with my fingers at a restaurant, but I'm not going to do it because I've been socialized and because there's certain things in place and we learn how to temper our behavior. And I myself am personally responsible for my actions in a civil society. And the same responsibility and the same sense of autonomy needs to fall to men. You should be able to see a naked woman, gorgeous or young or however you like it, your dream woman walking naked and not be tempted to say, I'm entitled to that. You're not entitled to anything.
Right. Exactly. And that's the whole thing, is people keep wanting to, you know, Erykah Badu and people who are trying to like support her are like wanting to say like, well, let's talk about like this just kind of like this biological imperative. Well, if we were constantly talking about biological imperative, you know, some of us would still be slaves.
Yeah.
Right. We create societies, we create social contracts about what we're going to permit and what we're not going to permit. And right now, as far as I know, you know, it is not permissible. We have agreed that it's not permissible for adults to have sex with children.
Right.
So why are we now acting brand new, using biological arguments to start questioning this? You know what? I kind of feel if that's the way you think, yeah, all of y'all need to go find yourself a fucking island and do your fucking whack shit over there. Because I'm not down for changing the social contract that we have here.
Yeah.
To allow your shit. And you know, we do have societies like that NAMBLA, right? That feel like, oh, well, you know, in other cultures and other societies in ancient Greece, whatever, you know, men used to have sex with boys and it wasn't a big thing. Well, then you know what? You can take your time travel your ass back to that time and place. Yeah. And do your whack shit. I don't want to be in a society where that's okay.
Exactly. And you're right. And there is a social contract. And quite frankly, what I had take issue with this whole biological imperative, it's also a biological imperative that if we get into a car accident and it was your fault, my biological imperative is to beat the crap out of you, steal your car, and right. You know what? But we have a society, and that's the law, and that's not the laws that we have. Because I temper my biological urges. If I flare up in anger, there's a set of consequences. There's things I cannot do. But my biological imperative, quite frankly, if you piss me off enough, is to beat you silly. You know, but I temper that. We all temper that. That's the decision we made as adults. So this whole thing of like falling back to biological imperatives is ridiculous. We've learned to temper biological imperatives across the board. It's one of the reasons why, you know, we have a modern society.
Let's get back to the whole thing, right? Because why are we having this conversation? We are having this conversation because a very notable, visible, loved, popular artist is the one who started tweeting about this. And let's talk about what happens when, when our faves say things that we find are really problematic. People, when I notice, like, a lot of people are really hurt by this, especially young women who love Erykah Badu in general, but especially women who are survivors of sexual assault. Yeah. They are deeply hurt by these positions. So, but then you got some folks that are kind of like I remember, I think it was Talib who was saying, "Oh, you guys are just so ready to discard people," right? I guess that whole kind of like social media, but the outrage culture, jumping to drag people. And first of all, I didn't see anybody dragging her. I saw people pushing back and challenging her. And I think she should be challenged, not only because I also disagree with what she says, but anybody should be able to be challenged around their views. And just because you're being challenged doesn't mean you're being discarded. Quite the opposite. If you're being pushed back on, it's because we are trying to keep you within the community.
Right. Exactly right. But also, here's the thing. It's we didn't drag you into the conversation. You put yourself in. So if you're going to speak up, you have to, if you're willing to be lauded for your words, you need to also be willing to be condemned for them as well. Especially in an arena in which you put yourself in. And I think this is, and honestly, I'm going to sound a little bit of a bit of a jerk right now and say, just because you're an actor and you're a wonderfully talented actor doesn't really mean you're equipped to really speak across a broad range of issues. That might be your own ego talking, and then with wonderful, you can absolutely and wonderfully show a wide range of feelings, and then there's an intelligence and understanding character, and that's great. But that doesn't mean that you're well versed enough to be able to talk intelligently on any number of subjects. The difference is that you're given the platform to do so. So, do I think, as she as a human being have a right to get into the conversation? Sure, she does. But given her platform, if there's pushback, it's going to be big, and you're going to disappoint a lot of yourself.
Siri, we're talking about Erykah Badu and what happens when your faves fail. Do we want our entertainers to speak on these things or not?
It's interesting. I'm going to interject something really quickly based on what Maria just said, and then I'll get to the Erykah Badu. So apparently President Barack Obama is meeting with like 12 different artists in the hip hop R&B genre to discuss criminal justice reform. And so someone posed the question, why are you meeting with artists to discuss criminal justice reform? Now, among the artists are artists who speak out heavily about criminal justice, about, in America, about the adverse effect that the
system who some of the artists are?
Yeah, J. Cole, I think, was on there. Who else was on there? Some of the artists, I don't remember. Some of the artists are artists who have been vocal about this, so I could understand speaking with them. I don't. I'd have to pull it up, and I can. But I bring this up to say because the question that the person who posted it posed is the same. It's sort of along the lines of what Maria is saying. Right. Yes, these people have a platform. Yes, they have millions of followers. But are they really equipped to give advice or to give suggestions about how our criminal justice system should be reformed when they don't actively work in the criminal justice system? So they're not in law enforcement, they're not in the legal aspect, they're not in the political aspect. Now, I do personally believe that artists of all genres have a responsibility to the public. I have always believed that. I was confronted with that question probably for the first time when I was in college. And it was something that I thought about a lot. And I always felt like if you have an audience, even if your audience is a classroom or your audience is an arena or your audience is whatever, that there is some responsibility or that you carry some responsibility for the things that you say. Now, I know people disagree with me on that, and that's fine, but that's just always where I've been, I think, and why myself as a writer, as a performer, has always been a bit political, because I always see my work as like a platform for me to talk about the issues that are important to me or the things that I think need to be spoken about. Erykah, so I read through some of the tweets, and it's hard for me because I work in education, And so I work with young women all the time. And, you know, I'm not for policing how young women dress in this way. I am concerned about how young women dress. I am concerned about how older men look at young women, because I have been on the receiving end of that. I have witnessed it as an adult woman. And I don't think that the conversation is just with young women. I think the conversation is with young men. I think the conversation is with older men. You know, so I don't want to, it's very tricky, because I do want young women to take care of their bodies and to love their bodies, and to, you know, I have my own sort of semi-conservative views about how much skin we really do need to show. But at the same time, you know, we can't have, that's a one-sided conversation, whatever Badu is doing. And, you know, my question is, when does the conversation happen with the older men of the world who we're saying can't control their behavior or their actions, you know, or the things that they say to these young women? There was, I don't know if we talked about this before, but there was that one poll that came out about the first time young women realized that men were looking at them in a sexual way. And I think that the youngest age where you saw it skyrocket was like 11.
Wow.
That, I mean, my niece is 10. And she's, yeah, you know, my niece is 10 years old. This girl has a body on her at 10 years old. Yeah. She's got, like, she's beautiful, you know, and it's a fear and it's a worry. But then is it my responsibility to say, no, you gotta wear this muumuu to school every day because I don't want anybody to look at you, you know?
It's irrelevant. But you know what? Here's what's irrelevant. If somebody has predatory, the problem is if somebody has predatory intentions.
Right. It doesn't matter what they wear.
What anybody wears.
Yeah.
First of all, the gender of the predator is irrelevant, as well as the gender of the target is irrelevant.
Right, right.
If an adult has predatory intentions, feels entitled to have sexual access to a child, what that child wears is irrelevant.
Yeah, it's irrelevant. Yeah, no, you're right.
But I also want us just to move us into the conversation about more, because we want to now, because now we're talking about things like certain social justice issues. And and it's connected to how we starting to see, you know, now with this election coming up, different celebrities taking sides in the electoral politics, and we're come on because for that conversation. You know, my feeling about, I feel like artists and entertainers and people who are visible and people who are may or may not be affluent based on their, you know, celebrity, they're people, and they're entitled to have their opinion. But so just like anybody else, you need to be held account for what you say and do. It just so happens that they have bigger platforms, they have greater visibility. And I feel like if you do have that greater visibility, you have that bigger platform, like it or not, you have more responsibility. You do, because you are more visible. So I don't ever want to say that, look, when someone says stuff that I really appreciate, I don't want that person to get shut down, because I'm like, when Rosario says stuff, like, I really believe that Rosario, I loved her open letter to Dolores. I felt that those things needed to be said, and I actually said them very respectfully. I didn't feel that she at all came for Dolores. She was just challenging her and trying to hold her. So when I want someone like a Rosario, who I tend to agree with, to speak up, I can't say that, you know, someone who has far more conservative, a celebrity or an athlete or whatever, who has far more conservative views, oh, you need to shut the fuck up. You need to just go play basketball. I don't want to say that, because I don't want the person that I agree with to be silent.
I think
it also comes down to, like, but it also comes down to who.
That's all. They need to be pushed, challenged. Now, so I do want our artists to speak their mind. Just know that people are going to talk back to you. Not you because you're visible, or you got money, or because you're wealthy, or because you're popular, doesn't mean you get to talk and nobody gets to come back at you. That's what it means to be in dialogue and conversation. Right. So as far as, on that note, I felt that Rosario's letter, some people felt that her letter was disrespectful. I don't think her letter was disrespectful at all. I feel that people feel like just the fact that she has something to say to Dolores what that they felt was disrespectful. And I disagree.
Yeah.
But I also think that goes back to being able to attack the content of what they're saying versus their ability or their right to say it. So if you're a celebrity, great, you're going to have an opinion. As long as I am the receiving end of that opinion, I'm only attacking the content. If you cross the line, that's fine. I can tell you, listen, I don't agree with you, like with Erykah Badu. I'm not saying Erykah Badu shouldn't talk about it. I'm just saying, listen, what you said is disappointing, and these are the reasons why. And there's been huge justice movements around the content of your statement, and this is what I'm going to argue back against. But I'm not going to say Erykah shouldn't. She's a human being. She has as much, and does she, does she have privilege in having that platform? Just believe.
I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that I think happens is that people assume that once you get into any form of entertainment, whether it's music or filmmaking or whatever the case may be, that you suddenly are no longer academic.
Right.
And that you suddenly are no longer socially or politically engaged, that you're in this world. And I think that's why we say to people like, oh, just go play basketball. And when I say we, I mean other people, not necessarily us here. Go play basketball, or so-and-so should stick to music, or so-and-so should stick to whatever, right? So, and I think that's unfair, because when we take the time to really look up some of these folks, some of them are actually very well educated and they're very well informed. And, even if they don't have a degree in something, they're paying attention. You can see in what they write and how they speak, like they're engaged. So why
activists
this is not anything new.
Obama was meeting with certain entertainers.
Right.
It's a problem if all he was meeting with entertainers.
Right.
This is why I asked you if you knew
who was on the list. Yeah, I'm gonna look that up.
People are actually on the ground working at the grassroots level. They're showing up to meetings. They're not celebrities in those spaces.
Right. And they're activists. Right. And
they're entertainers.
A lot of the people that they're not activists. A lot of the people that were in that collective were also a lot of the people that did that big. There were a couple of big events, one around the Flint water crisis and another one that happened a couple of months ago, where a lot of the same people that were at those events were also part of this collective that Obama was speaking to. So clearly he identified them because they are people who are engaged, who are knowledgeable, who care, who maybe want to do something, and hopefully he's going to provide them a platform or a way for them to continue to be engaged. I think I agree with you ladies that, it's not for us to say, oh, you can't have an opinion on this. Right. I don't think that that's fair. I think that we can be critical of the opinions that our artists have. I am grateful that they're having opinions. And I know that we have talked about this before, where we have been critical of artists and entertainers who stay out of the I think those artists tend to get more criticism from us because they're just not speaking out on these incredibly important topics where their voices could potentially be extremely helpful. Yes. So I don't want to say that. I think with the open letter to Dolores, one of the things is that Dolores is such a revered figure. It's almost like she's untouchable, which is really BS, and we know that. But I think for some people, the way that I was looking at the commentary, it was like, how dare she? Like that. How dare she speak out against Dolores Huerta? And it's like, Dolores Huerta is a woman with opinions. Rosario Dawson is a woman with opinions. And, why can't Rosario Dawson have something to say about these issues or something to say in response? And I think it was perfect. It was probably more appropriate for someone like Rosario Dawson, who's a young Latina, to challenge, a Latina that's revered in our community. Right? Because you're our leader. You're someone that we look to, as you're someone that we look up to for all of the work that you've done. And she started off her letter that way, sort of outlining all of the things for which Dolores Huerta is revered for. And I think that's important. And I think you're right, Sophia. It's not like she came at her. It wasn't like a straight up, trying to shut her down or cut her down. It was just more like, I respect who you are. and what you've done, and here's where we disagree, and these are the points that we disagree on. And I thought it was beautifully written. I mean, you know, and that's, I mean, yeah.
I think like what we're getting at here is this is where celebrity and fame becomes very kind of problematic, and not just in the entertainment field. I mean, because Dolores Huerta is famous,
right.
Politically speaking, she's a celeb in that way because she is someone who was very visible for the contributions that she has to social justice in this country. And we get into this thing where we reify people and we act like they're not people.
Right.
They're imperfect. They are not gods. They are not, you know, everybody has a shadow. And we can respect, appreciate, and love Dolores Huerta for all that she's done and all that she continues to do. Social justice, that doesn't mean she's beyond critique. Rosario is not beyond critique. None of these people are beyond critique. And so I think that becomes a problem. Is like we have to learn to be able to allow people their complex humanity and their flaws. And how do we learn to engage? Is it all of a sudden that somebody's visible? Because somebody's visible and somebody made a contribution, yay, back in, or that they're somehow flawless and can never get it wrong and can never be challenged. And that is a very dangerous thing.
But you like an unrealistic expectation from the populace.
Very dangerous. You know, it's just not fair. And I actually think, here's the funny thing. It's like, we're making a big like hubbub about, was Rosario respectful or not? Was it even respectful? Like, it was just disrespectful to even think about writing a letter. Never mind what she said. There's some people who feel that way.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy.
You know, my whole thing is Dolores, I don't think had a problem with the letter. I think she, I don't think she had an issue with the letter. But she's not so fragile.
Because there was no response
from this younger woman who cares about the same thing she does. I don't think she had a problem with it. So why should we?
Right. I think she, you know, I don't recall, and I could be wrong. I don't recall that there was any like formal response from Dolores Huerta or people around Dolores Huerta. I think all of the response seemed to come from fans or, you know, just people in the community, you know, like in the outside community, I guess, outside of like anyone who's famous for any particular reason. And, you know, Dolores Huerta has been getting quite a bit of critique because of her support of Hillary Clinton. Excuse me. And I'm sure she's gotten critique all her life. You know, I think we know that once you're in the public eye for any reason, you're going to face some critique, right? Whoever it might be from. People who disagree with your politics, people who feel slighted by your politics, you know. So I don't think that Dolores Huerta is unaccustomed to being criticized in some way. You know, anybody who's an activist has to get used to people coming at them and saying, no, you're wrong, you know, like whatever the case may be, because that's what we're doing. We're making people uncomfortable in the society when we become active around a social issue, a political issue. But I think we do need to make space and understand that if we're going to say that these artists have if we're going to say that our entertainers, that our famous people known, have a responsibility to our community, then we can't then jump on them when they exercise that voice. You know, we're saying you have a voice, you have a platform, you should use it, and then criticize them for using their voice and their platform. We don't have to agree with everything, but
I also think that part of it is also that we've become an unsophisticated audience. We have this kind of capability, like we want them to stay in their lane. These are not television characters. They're not they're fully complex, fully developed. They're going to air. They're going to be right. Sometimes they agree with us, sometimes they don't. But let's not be children. All right, Dolores purpose. You know what? For all we know, she's been somebody who's working on the really nitty gritty of moving forward an agenda. There may be many reasons why she's doing it for Hillary. Maybe she made a back end deal. Maybe there's something in it for her. But the thing is, she's public, but she's not a deity, and she can't be sanctified. That's a problem that we have when we create deities that are living humans. Disappoint you. Eventually, they're going to be on the other side of an issue. But it falls on you. You know, be a grown up. People change. People have opinions. Rosario, I may be on the same side as Rosario now. I may hate her for something. She may pull Erica Badu on me, and now we're enemies again. You know, but it changes. People are human.
I think, Maria, what you're saying is actually a really wonderful segue, because we're already at 12:37, and I think I really want to discuss about these allegations against Africa Bambaataa, because nobody else is fucking talking about it, and it's really working my nerves.
Yeah,
like, here's what, and I've been thinking about this for so long, and I'm one, and this is what's really challenging for me. It's like, right, we want to remember that our cultural icons, our political icons are people. Right? That they do have flaws, that they're not perfect. And again, like I'm always saying, everybody has a shadow self. And things that we're struggling with, and things that we're trying to grow on, and things that are just not, things that are ugly. All right. So I guess what's really challenging me is where we draw the line, right? Because Africa Bambaataa has just, people are like, okay, like Erica Badu, I loathe what she said. Yeah. And I think it's a real problem. But I think we struggle with her. And I think, she's still a part of the community, right? We don't discard her. We don't throw her out. But we gotta pull her card, right? Yeah. So are there any, I'm just curious, like, are there any issues where we're gonna say bottom line, you're out. You're out. The people, we take your card, you're not part of the people. Because like, if you listen to the interview, and I'm bringing this up because if you listen to the interview of, I think he's the third man to come forward and accuse Africa Bambaataa of sexually molesting young boys and young men. This man, it is so obvious that he is coming forward after doing a tremendous amount of healing from his molesting.
Yeah.
And because when you listen to this interview, he still has love for Bambaataa. He says all he wants is for Bambaataa to admit it, to get help, and to give back to the community. Like he said that in this interview, I sat him down. The man admitted it to me. He apologized to me. He cried, and he agreed that he would get help and that he would create programs for the young people. He said, that's all I wanted. This is a man who was saying that African Bambaataa molested me, and I still don't want to discard the brother. And he's like, I still don't want to throw him away like he has no value because he did this. But I do want to hold him accountable. Right. And if he's willing to be held accountable, I will ride with him. And it just goes to show you that for me, this just makes the man beyond like credible. And that's even more reason why I'm like, why is no one talking about this? Is it because he's an icon? Is it because the victims are boys? No. Is it because, because from what I see, none of these men that are coming forward have a damn thing to gain. The statute of limitations is run out. I don't think they're trying to ruin this man. I just think they're trying to stop him. Yeah. Because if he has a problem and no one says anything, he will continue.
Yeah.
I think it goes hand in hand with the whole Bill Cosby thing. And I think also part of this whole, the white male supremacy thing. I feel like in the African American community, they're persecuted for so much that they're not even given the luxury of being able to condemn one of their own, because they feel like a few precious people that are above reproach. I can't let you come at them. You know what I'm saying? I can't let you come at Cosby. I can't let you come at the few legitimate pieces of legacy that we have. And that's just unfortunate, because if you're in the white mainstream, you can lose a couple of icons and you're fine. It's not a condemnation of race, it's not a condemnation of entire culture. But I think in the African American community, there's this a sense of like, let's circle our wagons. They can't come at one of our own. We'll deal with it interior. It's almost like what is it? Wanda Sykes says, the white people are watching. Like have this conversation when the white people are watching. And that's a damn shame, because it's just detrimental to them. But I do feel that's part of it. I think that's why there's so much radio silence around it.
I think I would also add that part of the radio silence may have to do with the fact that in general, we are, in terms of masculinity and manhood, we're still struggling to understand and to accept that young men can be molested, that I think, and I've seen it all around. We've seen it in the religious community when it's happened, just trying to keep it hushed or trying not to give validity or legitimacy to the experiences. I've seen it, also in the Penn State case, right? So you see these patterns of behavior, you see the wide response. Women who are victims of molestation and rape, are treated one way. Men are treated differently, and that's a reality. And I think, what I find very interesting is that the men in most of the cases, the men are coming out much later in life. Why is that? Why are they not saying when it happens? How are they being silenced when it happens? How are they being silenced as adults? I mean, these men, unfortunately, are not necessarily looked at as victims. They're looked at as less of a man sometimes, and I think there's a sort of a whole other level to that conversation that we're not dealing with. When we talk about domestic violence, we always talk about women as being the victims. When we talk about sexual molestation and rape, we always talk about women being the victims. We're not talking about or acknowledging that men are also victims to that as well, and that screws up their whole lives the same way that it does to a woman. And I think, and I agree with you, Maria, that I think that we when we have these icons, because again, there are so few, you sort of see two camps. You see the camp that's like lynch mob camp and wants to get rid of them, and then you see the camp that's like desperately trying to protect them at all costs, because you're right. In some cases, they may be one of the very few that we have. Although, I mean, maybe they're different, I don't know. But when I look at a Roman Polanski, when I look at a Woody Allen, and I just look at how different they have been treated despite very similar allegations, there's also that race level as well. And I think, something that Sophia said that struck me is that what the men are trying to do, or the route that they've taken with Africa Bambaataa, is incredibly amazing to me. That this is really about healing him and helping him and healing for themselves as well. But, this is not about, I'm going to attack you and destroy your legacy and your reputation. This is about, we recognize that there's a problem in our community, and that there might be a lot of other people out there in the community doing this very same thing, and we're not talking about it, and we're not dealing with it. And, maybe our community is different. Maybe we don't want to oust people from our community, or maybe what we want to do is help heal them so that they can continue to maintain some of that, some of what they do. And I think in general, when we have someone even like R. Kelly,
For me, R. Kelly can, because R. Kelly is not even at all apologetic or remorseful.
No.
I feel the same way about Chris Brown when it comes to his violence.
Yeah.
Because my thing is there is no remorse there.
Right.
That's the problem. I don't know.
It's sociopathic, and I think
I'm feeling that some of the signs from African Bambaataa is because a lot of people are culpable. He might have been the one doing the molesting, but a lot of people knew he was doing the molesting and turning a blind eye. And I feel that might be where a lot of silence is. I feel that there's silence, not because people are shell-shocked.
Yeah.
I think there's silence because everybody knows, and it's like, oh shit, it's out now.
You know what?
Well, because then there becomes
I don't have any proof, but that's what I think.
No, but then
God is telling me it's going on.
But it makes sense.
You know what? I think the unspoken part about this is it was young boys, and I think there's an extra layer of patriarchal, now if you're presumed to be gay, that's homophobia.
There's that. I mean, I think that this, and maybe it's a little risque to say it, but I think you're right. And I think that, you know, communities of color are having trouble dealing with homosexuality on some levels. Not all.
No, not all.
You know, but you know, dealing with masculinity and machismo, and it's not allowing us, it's preventing us from dealing with these issues when they do come up.
And remember, we're talking in the context of hip hop, which is where
where masculinity and that bravado is like given a license to flourish.
Things that you're talking about are amplified.
Yes, yes.
Hip hop is known for its its heteronormative,
hyper masculine. Yep.
With its heteronormativity, with its violence, with like, and it's not that there isn't hip hop that isn't about that.
No, not at all.
But then here's the irony, and this is what makes these allegations even particularly more disturbing, because African Bambaataa is considered one of the founding fathers of hip hop. And when you look at his story about how he came to be someone who was this purveyor of hip hop, and it was particularly to be anti-violent. We're talking about a man who was a former gangbanger, who decided that hip hop was a way that he was going to reduce violence in his. I think the other thing that's at play here, besides the homophobia and besides the really, again, all the way that masculinity is constructed in very, in patriarchal ways. Part of also what's going on here is the separation from this sex and violence. So he's having these sexual interactions with these young boys, and somehow that this is not violence.
Right.
It's violent.
Right.
Now let's say we're talking, and this is where it gets tricky, right? Especially when we start talking about older, right? Like, because we see this, we have these conversations too when we're talking about young girls with men, right? 15, 16 years old, and even though technically, legally, right, it's statutory rape and it's against the law, it gets more complicated because when you're talking about people who are 15, 16 years old, they have more of a sexual agency. And that complicates the conversation because it's only a technicality legally that they cannot consent.
Right.
But then at the same time, how can you consent if your molestation started at such a young age?
Right.
So we, like, again, as these stories come out, because a lot of what these men were coming forward are saying is that this molestation started young, and this stuff was coerced. That this stuff was not, he was my idol. I looked up to him, and I wanted to be sexually involved with him. And this is what complicates the conversation. And so that we have not realized that we have to break out. And again, with Erykah Badu, that these are adults who are attempting to have sexual encounters with young people who are still figuring themselves out sexually. So it doesn't matter if you're 2, 10, even if you're 15, 16 years old, it's predatory for you to be trying to have sexual relations with someone who's still figuring them out sexually. They're not old enough. They're still figuring it out, and it's exploited for you to do that. And it's violence, and we just have to call it what it is. Like, even if we want to talk about these nuances and whatever, it's violence. And
there is a reason why
from what's going on.
Yeah.
But there is a reason why those laws, and there's age limits for, or age laws for drinking, for voting, for fighting in a war, for consenting to sex. It's because you're 16 and maybe maybe the body is ready, but the mind isn't, and so it doesn't really matter whether, they thought they wanted to have sex. They didn't know enough. And I think that's why we have these age limits. They didn't know enough to know what they wanted.
Right.
And that's why adults
are the ones that are responsible.
Shouldn't be looking at them as possible sexual partners.
Thank you very much.
Because you're not partners.
Right.
There's a power dynamic there.
Exactly.
And that's why if you choose to, and I'll say that about Bambaataa with these boys, I'll say that with whatever people that Erykah Badu is trying to apologize for. I will say that with the woman school teachers that starts having sex with a 15-year-old male student. you a predator. This is violence. Fine, be attracted, right? Be attracted. But when you cross that line, you are doing violence. Go find an adult to figure your shit out with.
Exactly.
You know, I'm so upset that nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. And for all the things that I think you guys are saying about it is the hypermasculinity in hip hop. It is the homophobia. It is the like, oh my God, the white gaze. Oh my God. The last thing we need is for, you know, being concerned about being pathologized once again. And I'm like, look, I feel that what the hip hop community has to do is that we have to take a strident stand against this. I'm like, if we are really concerned that, oh my God, this is going to, again, thrust hip hop into this negative, pathological light, then the last thing we should do is be silent.
But what are they? But this is what I don't understand. So we're protecting the genre and we're protecting the culture and not protecting the people. It doesn't, you know, that argument makes very little sense to me. And I know you're just saying the argument. It's not, you know, it's just like we sometimes need to put ourselves on the line if we really want to change, if we really want to fix some of the things that are wrong, that are going on with us. I certainly don't want to wait for someone on the outside to come in and say, oh, this needs to change. I think that it needs to, whatever changes need to happen, need to be recognized and dealt with within ourselves, you know. And the thing is that even something like sexual molestation and that kind of stuff, it, you know, it more likely happens by people we know. You know, that's what the statistics are showing. So we're doing that, you know, this is happening by ourselves, to ourselves, in our own communities. And, you know, I think that it needs to be dealt with. And I think something that you said earlier, Sophia, really struck me, which is that what happens, you know, all these people that may have known what was going on and didn't step in or step up or say anything, you know, they become on the line also, because, you know, then it's like, is it almost like an accomplice, right? You're there, you know, maybe you're an adult in the situation and you're allowing this person to continue in what they're doing without checking them, you know. And sometimes the only person that can check you is another adult, somebody who's at your level, somebody who, you know, can look at the behavior and see the pattern and see, you know, what the hell is going on, you know. And it's very interesting because it's like, are we condoning the behavior? Are we, with our silence, right? Are we condoning it? Are we making it okay? Are we going to say, you know what, nobody's really paying attention to this? You know, Africa Bambaataa doesn't have the kind of exposure that he once did, you know, or whatever. Only certain people are going to care, maybe. I don't know, right? This conversation would happen. I mean, but again, look at the conversation around R. Kelly. Nobody really deals with it. Nobody really cares. He's still, and that's not true. I shouldn't say nobody really cares, but on mass.
Whenever he comes up, people come for him. You know,
I know. That's why I retracted that. It's not that nobody cares. I think, though, en masse, we've just we joke
not enough
about
people
it.
care.
That's the problem. We joke. Not enough. We've become so desensitized to an R. Kelly situation that, you know, if people take him or leave him. Some people have chosen to completely leave him or to come after him every time he comes up. And some people joke about it. You know, how many jokes haven't there been about it? And so he's never really accountable. And I think that's why he's allowed not to have any remorse, because he hasn't really been shunned in a big way by the community.
Huh? Well, that's also that whole concept of like, you know how you have like the really pervy uncle, and you kind of just have the and that's not like Sophia said earlier. There are certain things that are like worth being shunned from. You know, we need to excommunicate a couple of these family members. We do it in our personal lives. We need to do it as an audience. So.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta tell you, if you listen to the interview with like I said, I think he's the third accuser, and like I think so far 4 men have come forward. My heart is breaking for these men, because they are coming forward and nobody is taking a stand for them.
Right.
And that's why they haven't come forward.
Right.
We're talking about men who I think are like in their 30s and 40s. Yep. And they are coming forward. And people are not taking a stand for them.
Right.
And it's just, and again, when you listen to this interview, like Star, every time he tries to take it into like a sensational place, like what other celebrities knew that he was doing this? This man keeps taking it back to what happens. He keeps taking it back to healing and reconciliation, doing the right thing. And it's so the fact that they are being, they got nothing to gain.
Right.
There's no money to be gained.
Right.
There's nothing but ridicule.
Right.
For all the reasons that both of you have said, there's not, and people are not standing for it.
Right.
And like, if you know, and here we are in a patriarchal society, and Black men are coming forward and saying that they've been. This man says that Bam has been molested too. He says, so I think, and it's because of that perspective. And he says, and when Star tried to say, oh, so he'll molest you, but he'll also give you money to go to college. This man says, no, he'll give you money to go to college, not because he's molesting you, and that's the trend. He's giving you money for college because that is the part of him that is good. That is the part of him that is worth holding him accountable for his abuse, because that part of him is worth saving. So this shit is just fucking me up. It's just it's fucking me up.
I think we have to kind of like, using that family metaphor. The same way that there are certain people that just need to be like, stop. That's you've crossed a major line. We also need to look at all of our icons and kind of the same way we look at our family. Like, listen, that uncle was a huge racist, but he was also kind. We need to be able, as an audience, look at people in a nuanced way. You know, where are your lines? Where do you cross them? But kind of say, listen, my family was horrible. It was terrible. It was a terrible childhood. But at the end of the day, I made it out okay. And there's some things worth saving. Cosby's legacy will always be Cosby's legacy. He changed the landscape for American television. Bambaataa changed the legacy of hip hop. He created something. But it doesn't mean they did. You know, a lot of these gods have clay feet, and we have to be okay with those clay feet.
I think too. I think we need to be. We need to be a little bit more realistic, you know, and humanize people. And there's a lot of ugly in humanity, and that's real, you know. And I think that's what, you know, that's also what you're saying. I think, unfortunately, I think it really depends on the individual where to draw the line. I know that, like, I, for one, with people in my personal life, you know, draw the line, and no, I won't break bread with you because I can't anymore. You know, I can't do it to myself to do that. I can't, you know, I need to be able to sleep at night too. You know, unfortunately, what happens with some of the stars is that we don't have to break bread with them. We don't have to look at them every day. We don't have to deal with them and confront them every day, even though we may be confronting the very same issues in our lives every day. And I think that's why you have, you know, the people who will, no matter what, come after. I remember, you know, when Chris Brown, I was very torn with Chris Brown when the incident came out with Rihanna. And I was torn because he was so young. You know, if he had been 30 or 40 years old, I think I would have had a completely different response. But he was so young, and I felt at the time, I'm like, this dude is so hated that he is never going to be able to recover from this action and learn from it and change his behavior and move on and do something, because I didn't think that he was allowed to in the media. There was no room for him to rehabilitate because of what he did. And that's not to say that what he did was not atrocious and disgusting, because I think it absolutely was. Yeah. But but it's almost like, what do we want? What do we really want? Do we want to ostracize someone so badly that they just disappear and never have another human interaction? Do we want to recognize, acknowledge, deal with the problem and help healing happen across the board, right? Or do we want to pretend that nothing happened, let it slide, and move on? And I think what's hurting us is that all three of those things are happening all at the same time. And it's very confusing how to really deal with it, you know, how to really deal with it. And do we deal with are we dealing with one-time incidences the same that we're dealing with repeat offenders, you know? What makes it
difficult is, for me, what makes it difficult, especially for someone like an R. Kelly and a Chris Brown, again, is that if you're not willing to already say
right
that what you did was wrong,
yeah,
how can the healing begin?
exactly. Yeah.
Now there can be forgiveness.
I agree.
You can forgive people. You can forgive people. I would never tell anybody you got to forgive anybody. But forgiveness is a choice. Forgiveness is something that you can choose to do because forgiveness is something that you do for yourself. You don't really do it for the other person.
Right.
Do it for yourself. But in the end, that's someone's choice. And in the end, and you could still forgive somebody and say, I forgive you, but I don't fuck with you anymore. Because like you said before, it's like, I still got to sleep at night and I don't have to deal with you. So I think, you know, just what kind of gets back to is, I think that a part of why this happens, and especially in communities of color, I do think that internalized racism and internalized oppression plays into this. Because, and also consumerism, right? So we have to put it in a capitalist context. So these two things together get us to a point where we have started to believe that our own genius is scarce. You know what? If we decide to say, fuck you, R. Kelly, you don't want to be held accountable, you think there's nothing wrong with what you're doing, get the fuck out. I'm not buying your shit no more. We're not putting money in your pockets. Getting lawyers so you could keep molesting girls, right? Because we got this whole thing like, oh, but he make good music. He ain't the only fucking one who makes Chris Brown is not. It's a tragedy,
right?
That holding you accountable might mean that you won't make music, but you ain't the only one. So I kind of feel like part of what's at play here between our consumerist impulses living in a capitalist society, you know, because again, what we buy is feeding some other need, right? You know, capitalism creates, manufactures desires. These might not be things we're trying to fill things that we need with our purchases. And I think if we accept that, you know what, we could tell R. Kelly to kick rocks, we could tell Brown to kick rocks, we could say fuck that, and we're still gonna have wonderful culture and music and films because our genius is not scarce. So I think then we will then we might be willing to take these stands and change things. So that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering like how a lot of this our community's unwillingness to hold these folks that transgress in such heinous ways accountable is because we got this fear like because what's our excuse? Oh no, but I still love his music. Well, he's not the first and the last, and not the only. So if the only way we can check him. Stop buying his shit, guess what? There'll be 10, 15 other people in his place. And
it has happened. It has happened. You know, the case that I'm thinking about is the Jerry Lee Lewis case, right? He fell in love with his teenage cousin or whatever, second or third cousin or whatever, and they got married and he lost everything. He lost everything. The entire rock and roll community, the entire consumer community completely turned their back on this artist and he lost everything. You know, so it is possible. I think I had never thought about it that way before, like what you're saying, Sophia, about, you know, taking the risk to really send a message to artists who are doing these kinds of things and perpetrating these kinds of things that we don't agree with as a community. I never really looked at that way before. Like I think I had seen a lot of what Maria was saying, which is, there is because, you know, when we look, you know, sort of at the big picture, there's a scarcity, right? There's always these small numbers of people of color that are rising. And, you know, and if we take one out of the picture, what happens? But then putting that into the context of this kind of internalized oppression that we don't have that kind of talent in our community, not enough of it, you know, like it's just making me see it in a different way. And I think, you know, there's something to be said about, you know, when the person can show some remorse, can acknowledge, can, you know, even apologize, can, you know, take responsibility. You know, I think that says a lot for the potential, like you said, for the potential for healing, but it doesn't happen. I don't know if it's arrogance. I don't know if it's just the belief that they haven't done anything wrong. I mean, more so maybe Chris Brown. I mean, well, no, maybe both of them or whatever. But, you know,
Chris Brown believes he's the victim. It's a catch-22 because he did something wrong and he got rightfully called out, but there were also people who defended him. It wasn't like it was a wholesale Chris Brown was wrong, because
no, it never was.
Who were victim blaming Rihanna. So it wasn't that clean, right? And then, but there was some accountability. And he has used, and again, he's not the only one. I'm using him as an example. He has used that accountability to kind of double down and not do the work. And not he's like, you know, to make himself the victim. And I feel that it's a clusterfuck, because that's exactly right. Why? Because he feels like a victim. It's precisely why he has not gotten the help. And my understanding is that, I could be wrong, but my understanding is that, again, we're talking about victims victimizing other people. My understanding is that Chris Brown did grow up in a violent household. So he got this from somewhere. And according to Bambaataa's accuser, Bambaataa revealed to him that he himself was abused. So he's perpetuating the abuse that he experienced. So, but is that the case with everybody? No, some people are abusive because they're fucking abusive. And they haven't been held to account. Not everybody who's abused has been abused. Just like there are a lot of people who've been abused who don't turn around.
Who don't abuse, right.
You know? So, but then it becomes a clusterfuck. And you also got people around you, people who don't hold you accountable. If the people who really loved Africa Bambaataa and really loved Chris Brown and really loved R. Kelly knew they were doing it, then they will hold them to account. So we have to look at accountability as a profound act of fucking tough love. If we really love these people, we call their shit out and hold them accountable. We're at 108, so I want to give you guys each like a minute to just any lasting thoughts on any of the topics that we've been talking about.
I'd like to go.
I guess I just want to say to everybody, we were supposed to revisit it, the casting of Zoe as Nina Simone, because I guess the movie's coming out soon, and we wanted to have a guest who was pushing back on some of the comments that we made at our last blab, and we wanted to give her a chance to share her perspective with everyone and to respond to her. But she's in transit; she wasn't able to make it, so maybe we will revisit that conversation. I don't think we should not have that conversation because the issue is going to keep coming up. Look what just happened with Scarlett Johansson being part. That should have gone to
an Asian American.
It should have gone to an Asian actress, and maybe we should talk about that at one point too. I want to give Maria and Siri one last chance to say it, and then we'll post a replay for everyone who came in later so they can hear. And we can keep the conversation going on Twitter and Facebook. So we don't have to stop it here, but we will pause it here. So Maria, you want to go first, and then Siri, you can close us out.
Okay.
Well, actually, it's funny you should mention the Nina Simone, because that's kind of like a cliffhanger for the next time. I've actually changed my thinking a lot. Just in the sense that I now say, were we wrong in kind of attacking the African American community for having an issue with Zoe Saldana? Was there some anti-Latino there is, but there's also the greater issue is the African American community also isn't monolithic, and culture does have context. So now I'm like, if Viola Davis was going to play Celia Cruz, I'd have a problem with it. I'd be like, no. And so, did Zoe grow up as an African descent person in the U.S.? Yes, she did. But she grew up as an African descent person of Latino culture. So now I'm like, they weren't wrong. Afro-Latina really embody the struggles of an African American community.
Because we're talking about Nina too. And that's all that Nina means. My position hasn't changed, but it's actually become more strident. For whatever arguments we have for casting Zoe, push come to shove, she shouldn't have been casted. It should have been an African American actress. And for me, I really do believe in solidarity with the African American community, Latinos should boycott this film. This is not a Latino project, so the argument of support Zoe. We have to go to support Zoe. No, we don't. First of all, Zoe's not losing. Zoe's in Avatar. Zoe's in Star Trek. Zoe's in. So winning doesn't mean that you never ever make a bad career decision. We could still have love for Zoe and appreciate Zoe and not support this movie. I feel, and whatever curiosities that we have, can't trump, no pun intended, can't trump our solidarity. I feel like the biggest thing at stake here is solidarity with the African community, and we have to ride for them and say, fuck this movie.
Yeah, agreed.
What's you got the last word, Siri.
Okay.
On anything you want.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say I wasn't sure, but anywho, well, first of all, thank you folks for joining us, and thank you ladies for being your awesome selves as usual. I think that, you know, across the board, what I'm getting from our conversations is that there's a lot of work that we need to do in our community, and one of the ways that work begins is by putting on the table all of the things that we're uncomfortable with, putting on the table all of the things that we don't want to talk about and talking about them. And then after the talk happens, strategizing around who we want to be in the world and how we're dealing with these issues. I think that, you know, it's worthwhile to talk about Rosario Dawson and Dolores Huerta, because it fuses, I mean, at least for me personally, and I think for you ladies as well, if those are our two sides, right? We're all artists and we're all, you know, political. We're all women. We're all, like, you know what I'm saying? So like all of these, what I'm finding is that all of these issues, even the Nina and Zoe issue, the Dolores Huerta issue, and even the Africa Bambaataa and the Erica Badu, all of these things that we're talking about are bits of who we are as people. They speak to the things that we care about. And I think that, you know, for our community to really grow, we have to talk about these issues. And it can't just be on the level of, like the TMZ level, like, oh, look at what Erica Badu said today and la-di-da and move on from it. Like, no, what she said has real consequences, right? What has happened, you know, with Africa Bambaataa, the silence on it, what has happened to his victims, what is going on with him, that has real consequences. You know, Dolores Huerta's positioning right now politically has real consequences, right? All of these things have very real consequences for us. And so I just appreciate having the platform to really sort of talk about them and you know, and pick them apart, and also confront myself and my own issues. That's something that I think happened to me a couple times today in the conversation, where I'm like thinking about, whoa, wait, where do I stand on this? And, you know, am I flexible enough to change my thinking or to see things from another lens? You know, because that's the only way I'm going to grow, is if I get an opportunity to sort of get outside of myself and think about all these other things. And with respect to Nina and Zoe, I mean, I don't think I would have seen the movie anyway. There were so many other things that were happening with it. I do still have some questions and thoughts about what this conflict over this movie means for Latinas and for African American women. And that's really where I think I want to position myself in terms of moving that conversation forward.
So what we'll probably do is next month, hopefully Melanie will be able to join us, because it's like exactly what you said. When she pushed back on Twitter, you know, I was just like, you know, let's listen to this, because this is, again, this is what's really at stake here. This is what ultimately matters. And this is why entertainment is not apolitical. This is why this stuff matters. And like, let's listen and let's learn from this. And we may shift, we may not shift, and these are ongoing conversations. Yeah. So even if the movie comes and goes and it flops and whatever, we should not drop the conversation. Right. And Erica Badu, this is all, unfortunately, this is all going to happen again, which is why we have to visit the conversations and we have to listen to each other. And the reason why I invited Melanie, and I'm sorry that she wasn't able to make it today, which is why I want to give it another chance, another try next month, is because, you know, of the way that he, you know, talked about it on Twitter with me. And, you know, and I know a lot of people, and this is a whole other conversation, maybe at one point there'd be a blab to this, but, you know, there's a whole conversation about how you engage people and how you can't use the way people come at you as an excuse to not engage, which is true, but we're also human beings. And if what's really at stake here is solidarity, then how we say things does matter. Yep. Not just what we say. How, if we're trying to win together, and we want to come to these conversations as a win-win, and these conversations are difficult because they're high stakes. And so we do have to be like, you know, Ma, that hurt. That and we also, even when people come at us, we have to hear past what they say and to the core of what they're saying. And it's like, because again, the reason why I feel like we should boycott this movie is because the bottom line is whatever arguments you can make about bankability and whatever, and you know, is the bottom line is that people we care about, people who have been on our side, people who have supported us, were hurt. And we, by aligning ourselves with the structures that hurt them, is just not right. And so let's have a conversation about what solidarity looks like. And again, we may not all agree, because it's true, we're not monoliths. The Latino community is not monolith. But I just want to get to the point where I never use anybody's anti-Latino bullshit to not listen to the people who are trying to talk to me, who are trying to tell me this, you hurt me.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, you hurt me, not just to drag you, not just because I actually want a relationship.
Yeah.
So I think that would be a good place to end this. Everybody, thank you for joining in. If you came in later, there will be the replay. We will share the links. Follow us on social media so you'll get that link. We have a Latinas Chat Media Facebook page. All of us are on Twitter. And we will put that link up and we can keep the conversation going.
We can keep going. Yeah, we can keep it going on Facebook, on Twitter, anywhere else.
We'll hear you out. And we will get to the point where we'll be able to allow people to take the hot seat.
Yeah.
But until then, thank you for tuning in, and and we'll see you on the next Saturday, which is the third Saturday of every month.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. We missed you, Linda.
We missed you, Linda. Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a great